Hi there, I'm Kiva Stratton and welcome to Culture Snap. Today on the show, we've got John Safran, who's built a unique reputation as a daring documentarian and poignant comedian. John's been willing to place himself in some quite extraordinary situations to better understand the cultural fault lines he sees as most interesting or peculiar. Whether he's squatting at one of Kanye West's abandoned mansions, infiltrating a group of Klansmen, or getting curses removed from sporting teams, his career stands as one that needs to be seen to be believed. Watching John literally get crucified in the Philippines is some of the most visceral and shocking television you'll ever see. And if you haven't seen it, Google it. But maybe eat first. For all of John's wild antics, it's his ability to humanise his subject, build extraordinary empathy and bring nuance to modern debate that I feel is truly unique. It's not often I agree with Joe Rogan, but when he recently said John sounds like an unreal podcast guest, I had to agree. Sit back, get comfy. This one's a slightly longer episode, but we go deep into John's creative process and learn a little bit more about where these incredible ideas come from. Enjoy. John Safran, welcome to Culture Snap.
Thank you for inviting me on. I apologise to viewers about how I had to either get rid of the hat or have this sort of awkward little ear thing going on here, and I've gone with the awkward one because I prefer the overall look.
Yeah, you can't sacrifice the hat.
I'm going to go out tomorrow and buy little buds, so this will not happen again. And actually, the buds will match because look at this. The buds, if they're white.
You could get them in a nice cream, and then it's like this whole sartorial, kind of alignment that's happening.
Anyway, I'll stop wasting your time. What did you want to ask me, Kiva?
Well, I wanted to start, I suppose, back at the beginning. I don't want to talk too much about race around the world as such, because I'm sure you've talked about that many, many, many times.
I don't mind. Whatever you want.
You were young. This is the thing that kind of strikes me now when I think about that time. I mean, you must have been just like 21, 22, like very, very young.
Yeah, I think, 22, 23. I don't know, somewhere around that. So, yes.
And so overnight,
I was young.
You kind of went from, someone who I imagine had, anonymity to someone who, was positioned, I guess, on this show as the guy that people either loved or hated, wasn't it? It was this kind of, villain versus provocateur.
I think, dear viewer and listener, she's slightly hyping up how hated I was. I mean, I probably was surrounded by pandering yes men who would shield me from that. I don't think there was a judge on Race Around the World who kind of have a go at me, but I was considering it more like it was like World Wrestling Federation or Jerry Springer show where he attacks and I. In a good way. But anyway, go on. Sorry, I'll stop interrupting your question. You go on. I'm ruining everything.
I was just wondering how, as a 21, 22-year-old, to suddenly be famous, how did that sit with you? How did you feel about that?
I was fine because I was happy with the work. I wasn't... Before I landed on this show, which had a documentary structure, we sent back little 5-minute documentaries every 10 days and traveling around the world separately. And I went with a gonzo type approach where I inserted myself into everything because I thought that was funny. But I really made that up on the spot in that. And what I mean by that is I never thought about being on TV or thought about documentaries until suddenly I had to produce them. And, I knew I wanted to do something a bit kooky, but I didn't quite know what that actually meant. And I kind of figured it out on the road, and I figured out, gonzo. And by gonzo, I mean, rather than pretending you're the voice of God or you somehow, you're watching things, but it's not you really watching things. It's just things being watched, that kind of documentary. I kind of felt more comfortable, and I also thought it was funnier if I kind of obnoxiously just inserted myself into everything. And I also felt more comfortable because I did feel like it was a bit patronizing to be, for instance, I did this story in West Africa, where I got baptized by this, this black church there. And I get really involved in it, rather than observing this black church in the forest or whatever. That would have been, I'd feel uncomfortable with that. whilst me kind of just being part of it just made it, like on the one hand, it makes it seem cheekier, but on the other hand, I just feel like it's less condescending. And also I put a voodoo curse on an ex-girlfriend in another thing. I'm going around to these voodoo doctors, and that was my way of showing this interesting, like the voodoo practices in the Ivory Coast in West Africa. And again, I know it seems cheekier because it's like the anti-National Geographic way of doing things but I feel like it's both cheekier, but also I just felt more comfortable with it because I'm kind of uncomfortable with sort of like, oh, I'm the outside lens or whatever. But also it just, as soon as I made these stuff gonzo, it just fell into place. Like it just seemed like, everything started working. Like it's like, oh, that's my thing. That's what I figured out on the run. And everything I've done since has kind of been a version of that where I'm in the real world and I'm investigating something of worth to investigate, and also often finding things that generally other people aren't covering. Like I'm not saying I need a Nobel Peace Prize or anything like that, but you know, like everyone's like obsessed. Like you go to the Guardian and everyone's obsessed by the alt-right and the far right and things like that. That's like a relatively new thing. Like I was hunting down Klansmen in the woods where, like for books and stuff like that and docos, when part of the energy was people were like, what? How's John finding, what, they're still Klansmen? And also I did a lot of religious stuff, which again, it's a combination of intention and just vibing. I think a lot of my work's got those two things going on, where by intention I mean like, oh, this seems like an interesting story or something, or I want to tell this because I think it's important. Like that's part of it. But the other part's more vibing, and asking me to pick that apart is a bit like asking some musician to kind of go, oh, well, why do you write those notes in that order? On the one hand, on the most superficial level, I'm being a narcissist because, like, why am I in West Africa investigating this thing that's really like interesting and about other people, and why am I making it about me? But the audience kind of knows I'm playing a bit of a game. Like the audience knows that I know that this is narcissistic, so therefore it's kind of not, and I'm just being a bit cheeky or whatever. But all that was vibing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was interviewing a musician yesterday and he was talking about playing with feel, right? So you can can learn all the notes and you can have all that technical ability to deliver music, but there is something in that kind of playing with feel that really sets apart, great musicians from those who can kind of, hit the notes and make like a beautiful sound. And it sounds to me a little bit like your work is playing with feel, that it's essentially about, kind of going into that creative moment and seeing where the journey takes you rather than having a really set vision or idea for where it goes.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's like the feel, it's like I'm super interested in mysticism. And if I'd never got on TV or done any of this, I'd still be kind of reading about that. But there's like parts of me where I go, oh no, this is just going to be really strong for the piece, for me to interrogate this through the lens of mysticism or religion or whatever, because particularly in Australia, like, most people don't do that. And it's like amazing how, and so I'm kind of taking advantage, like almost like seeing an opening, like going, well, that's not being covered, that dimension, so why don't I do it? And that will make my work stronger because other people don't do it. So again, this sort of balance of intention and just vibing, and I do zig and zag based on what else is going on. Like I did this book, not my last book, but my book before my last book was investigating Philip Morris, the cigarette company, trying to get into vaping. And part of the reason I did that, my book before that was me hanging out with the far right and the left and some ISIS dudes in Australia in a book called Depends What You Mean by Extremists. But then after I'd done that book, it's like the world caught up with me, and suddenly like everyone's writing about extremists and about race and racism and all these things. And I'm like, oh, okay, I better jump around to something else. Like I probably wouldn't cover a story if I couldn't figure out how to make it vibey and stuff like that. Like, for instance, when I did Puff Piece, investigating Philip Morris, like one of the hard things, or one of the challenges at the start was, how do I make it like a me? So like it got my idiosyncratic stuff. And because people aren't going to find it that interesting if I'm just furious that Philip Morris gives people cancer. It's like, yeah, great, John. Like, obviously, like on some factual level, that's true, but that's not enough. And so I had to figure out, I had to have like an other drive. And so one of the drives I had was that Philip Morris kept on messing with language. Like they put out a new cigarette, but they called it a heat stick. And so therefore they got around legislation banning cigarettes, even though this was a cigarette, it was just called a heat stick. And then it was even crazier than that. You couldn't even try to expose them without falling into their language, if that makes sense. So to talk about heat sticks, I have to call them heat sticks. I can't call them cigarette. And so I was the frustration over that. And they just kept on changing words for things like tar. They said, oh, there's no tar in this. It's like they just changed the word for tar, and they played around with the concept of the definition of smoke to claim that something wasn't smoke when it kind of was smoke. And so that was driving me crazy. And as soon as that became the thing to chase, then it became interesting, way more than like me going, oh, I'm just really upset they're giving people cancer or whatever.
There's a chapter in there where you talk about how you're trying to get your hands on one of these heat sticks, and you know, you're kind of in this dark car park, and you meet this kind of character with this graffitied jacket, the graffiti of which you can't remember. So you love to paint this kind of almost cinematic view. I mean, you could have told that in, you know, a much more straightforward manner. Were there things, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you didn't necessarily want to be a documentarian, you know, that wasn't your vision for yourself growing up?
I honestly hadn't thought about it before. And like, if you would have asked me before Race Around the World about documentaries, I would have gone, oh yeah, I think a couple of times when I was young, I went to the cinema maybe with my parents and thought, so I had nothing against it.
But you hadn't indulged in it by the sounds of it. Like it wasn't your favourite genre of kind of content, and likewise gonzo, you know, as a form of journalism, it sounds to me like it's almost like an instinctive thing with you that you've just found that form as what feels most true to you.
Yeah, but after I came back from Race Around the World, I had like a person say to me, oh, you've obviously read Hunter S. Thompson. I'm going, no, what? What? And then I read that and I really liked that. So sort of after the fact, I kind of started looking into like different ways of journalism, like Hunter S. Thompson's, because he's the gonzo. The word gonzo comes from him and his subjective reportage, and also there was something in the atmosphere in the early 90s or mid 90s actually when I did that, because I think I did it in 1997 or whatever. And when I came back, people going, oh, you've got to see, there's this filmmaker called Michael Moore. And he'd just done his first film at that point called Roger and Me, where he's chasing down, trying to find the general manager of General Motors for screwing up his hometown or whatever. But I hadn't seen that before I went on Race Around the World. But like there was this kind of revival of this slightly pranky but with subtext filmmaking. And then a couple of years after that, maybe 1 year after that, like Ali G became something. And then there were just all of us all over the world who, for some reason, were doing this thing, whatever, this sort of thing where you kind of tell stories and you might have a prank in it that's got like a subtext. There was these other group of people, they were real activists called the Yes Men. There was this whole thing going on, like it was very. There was something in the air, a bit like everyone suddenly vampire movies are everywhere or something. It was like, what's happening here?
There was a mood.
Yeah, that was super exciting to be sort of on that wave.
So when you finished Race Around the World, and obviously, you know, that was a journey unto itself, not just a physical journey, but one where you're really kind of forming this idea of perhaps what a career could look like or what you could be in documentary. Did you ever stop to think, maybe I should go back to advertising now, or what, you know, what spurred the career on?
Well, because I had an opportunity to do a couple of pilots with the ABC, so I just thought, and I was just feeling like this is a moment. Like it was so much fun, and I was getting lots of good feedback. So I did that, and I'm a bit of I can't multitask. I have to monotask. So if I was cleverer or had a different brain, I could have gone, okay, I'm going to do 3 days in advertising and then 4 days on my work or whatever. But it's a miracle I can focus on one thing. So I bet the farm on just committing to my creative career, which I mean, yeah, you have sacrifices, but like for instance, I've done 4 books, and I don't reckon I would have written those if I had another source of income, because I'd be going. It's just too easy to sort of put things in the top drawer and spend 12 years writing a screenplay. But as soon as it's like paying for your groceries, it becomes like it adds this other dimension of things where you just have to work, and I just have to hustle. Even at the moment, I'm in the middle of a documentary I'm filming for SBS, and we're recording this in August 2024, and it's going to go to air March 2020. No, we're in 2025,
We're in 2025, John.
Oi, oi. So it's going to air in March 2026. So anyway, I'm in the middle of this, and and it's crazy. We've got about 2.5 weeks left to film. It's so crazy. But I'm still thinking, oh man, I have to work out what my next hustle is going to be after this, because it's my job. And there's a weird blessing when you have to do that, because it just forces you to it forces me to just have to hustle. And I've already got plans in my, I'm like going, oh, I want to do another doco after this, but if I can't get that up straight away, I think I'll go to that publisher and pitch them this or whatever. And I do go to where the work is. I have to remind myself about well into my career where I was going, oh, hang on, I just became a documentary filmmaker because that kind of presented itself, and I jumped on it. And then my last 4 big projects have been books, and then it became, oh, is my next thing going to be this doco, or should I do another book? And I had to remind myself, oh, hang on, the reason I wrote 4 books in a row was because I wanted to write this story set in Mississippi, and it was a true crime, and we can talk about this later if you want or whatever. And basically, the court case isn't going to stop and wait for me to somehow get a producer to then get something together to pitch to Screen Australia next July, and then da-da-da-da. It's like I either have to go now on the plane myself with my audio recorder and my notepad and just do it, or because I don't really have the skill set to film. That's another part of me where I've a very narrow skill set, and in a weird way that kind of helps, because it just means I can only do certain things, and regardless. Anyway, so I ended up writing this true crime book because that's what it presented itself, and I discovered when I started pitching a book, like book publishers were like, oh, wow, yeah, totally, yes, green light. And because, I mean, obviously book publishers have different requirements and different things for different books or whatever, but one of them is they like finding people who have a profile outside of being an author, and that can be really valuable. And so I've basically done 4 books because that's where the work has been. And I love it, by the way. I'm not like, well, whatever, but I remember when people ask me, like, oh, is your next thing going to be a book or a doco? I'm like, well, it depends whether I can get work.
And where it takes you.
Yeah, if like someone funds a doco, I'll do a doco. And if not, I'll do a book. And it's both great. It's 2 right answers or whatever. And also it's like sometimes people go, well, why don't you do a podcast? I'm like, I don't know. If someone figured it out, I would. Just tell me, you figure it out, tell me where to turn up, and I'll do it. It's like I did 10 years of radio nearly with Father Bob Maguire on Triple J. And again, they asked me. and it was like, okay, you turn up every week there. And I'm like, okay, cool. And done. So yeah, if you want me to do docos, like with my books, I really get the vibe from people like me that they prefer the audio book to the book, because they're like, because they can hear me. And I really get the sense that there are, amongst people who like me, it's like, well, it would have been actually better if you went around and filmed it, John. Like my last book, Squatting at Kanye's, like I definitely get the vibe people are like, well, yeah, why didn't you film Squatting at Kanye's or whatever? And I'm like, well, if a book publisher gives it to me, like, you can't write a book and be secretly going, oh, I'm actually filming this as a side project. That's my main. Yeah, it just doesn't. Yeah. Believe me, it's difficult enough. It's like to write a book and get that all right. So
it'd be harder to get a whole film crew squatting as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, and like all these things are just so involve such just what do you call it? Logistics and expenses and everything like that. And I've worked out how to do a book on my own, like being everything, but I can't do a doco on my own. It's actually been super fun filming this doco, which I've been filming for a couple of months with SBS. And, oh God, it's just so much. I just love working with a crew and it's both just fun not being on your own, like a hermit going crazy, but also just being stress-free. Like I can just walk around and some dude the sound guy puts the microphone on and I'm not stressing out like I am when I'm writing a book and I'm recording and...
You're not holding it all yourself.
So yeah, it's just so relaxing and it's, in a manner, like it's really stressful in all these other ways. But yeah, I'd love to do another doco ideally after this, but I just wish, surely there must be like one really rich person who will just go, okay, hey John, yeah, just put an ad for my car dealership at the front and I'll give you this money and just, and I'll get an executive producer credit and yeah, just do it. Because my docos, if you're that rich person out there, my docos aren't that expensive or anything. Like, like they're expensive. Like you can't lowball me, but they're not that expensive.
Well, I think that's the call to action, isn't it?
Yeah, if you're whining, oh, why doesn't John do more docos? That's fine. But if you're whining and you're rich, there is a solution. There is a solution to that. Anyway, there you go. Do you like my pitch, Tiva, to your... Because I looked at the flow graphs of your audience. They're all ABs. They're high-earning individuals.
Well, there probably are a few high-earning individuals with a good moral compass. So I think we can throw that out there and quite a few...
Even if you've got a bad moral compass, this is a way to of whitewash your... because that's the thing. If you're doing something that's like you're feeling guilty about how you get the money, this will assuage, if that's the word, your guilt. And I won't ask questions. I'll just...
So you're going to be a gonzo journalist for hire, basically, and you can go and investigate. I mean, this could be a whole other service line. You could be investigating, as almost like a kind of commercial advantage. You could just kind of hire you to go in there and expose the competition.
Now, some people will be listening, won't they? But if you're listening, you should just check out for a second what I'm wearing on the video version of this. This is what I've been wearing for my whole doco.
This is the outfit.
This is the outfit. This is me doing my SBS documentary.
Oh.
So I because it's...
And are we allowed to know anything about it, or is it just all...
It's looking at free speech and censorship and offence, the state of it in modern Australia. And the name of the project, don't you leak this before September 3rd.
Hey, I kept Kanye's secret for a year. I just want to...
That's when the SBS upfront is. So it's called Shut Your Big Fat Mouth, John Safran. ! At the end, and brought to you by the good people at SBS. And
it's a look into censorship.
Great. Yeah, look into free speech and censorship in contemporary Australia, modern Australia.
Fantastic.
So, and it's kind of, we haven't edited it yet. I feel like there's hope. We still got a few things we have to hit to bring it on home. But I think because I've really learnt with this that because it's such a sincere conversation, like people can tell I'm invested in the discussion, I think. And so it's kind of sincere, even though it's kind of fun and I'm being cheeky and all that stuff like that. Because of its heart, it's sincere. Probably like a really sincere question. I think that really helps things along. It's a bit like if I love watching things like car repair shows, but not because I'm into car repairs, but if the guy's obsessive about it.
So you like that kind of passion, the focus.
Yeah, I like the passion.
Yeah.
And you can really be into any show if the person's sincerely passionate about it. And anyway, I don't want to jinx it, and maybe
don't.
Maybe it'll end up being a car crash in a bad way, as opposed to a car crash in a good way, because I'm absolutely in for a car crash in a good way with my work. And if it's a car crash in a bad way, it will be a bit like, oh well. But it won't. The problem is it can't. I think with some stuff, if you it's a bit mid, to use that term, I think it just kind of goes away. But because the topic's so heated and because the issues I touch are so, explosive, because you just think of some of the things that people say are being censored these days, and we freaking, if you're thinking like, oh, I bet you John's not going to go there. We've gone there. So it's like people will be out to get me. And so the only thing that will protect me is if it's like funny and interesting, I guess. And I don't know that yet because I haven't seen the edit.
I think your reputation is more that you will go there, John, not that you would go there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for sure.
I think, that would be more the brand. But I'm interested in the sincerity because I think this is something that allows you to enter into spaces and immerse yourself into a lot of things that perhaps, other people would have doors slammed and kind of not be able to get there. All of your books, your documentaries, all of those things, there's kind of this common thread where you often put yourself in really like quite precarious situations. First, I want to know, are you ever aware in the moment with a sense of like fear as to what could go wrong in some of these? Or do you have just a confidence that you're going to be okay?
It's not really a confidence. I think there's a number of things, or at least two things. One is I do, like, just say you're speeding 10 kilometers over the speed limit, right? You're not thinking, oh, this is the time. The consequence of this is I'm going to be a paraplegic for the rest of my life. You just don't think that. You just think this bad thing is not going to happen, or you just put it to one side. So, yeah, when I'm knocking on the door of a Klansman in a forest in Mississippi, I just think this is going to be the time when I'm not going to be lynched. Like, I think it's going to be, I delude myself it's going to be fine. And sometimes a bit later, I'm like, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. Like, like when I squatted at Kanye's, it wasn't until I got back home to Melbourne where I was thinking.
Because they have guns in America. Lots of them.
Yeah, they've got guns in America. Yeah, you're right. But even like just the cops coming, it'd be like, oh, maybe this is one of those things where they ring up the Australian embassy and stuff. So there's sort of that whole level to it where I delude myself. I don't really think about all the angles until later, or the danger angles. And the other thing is, like, first of all, just my creative desires. I'm like, no, I want to do something good, and this is what I have to do to make it good. So I've got that going. And I definitely have, almost like independent of the creativity, I do have a bit of a work ethic on these things where I'm like, I have taken this money and I am responsible for getting this project done. Like, I just don't think I have an option of not coming back with something where I've tried really hard to make it strong. And I will literally think about, like, for instance, my SBS bosses who've greenlit this, or in Penguin Books, my editor who's greenlit this, and I'm just thinking, that's who I feel responsible for. And I'm like, I cannot face Nikki at Penguin or Bernadine at SBS or whoever.
I'm sure very lovely people. It's not that you're afraid of them.
No, I'm not afraid of them, but I'm like, well, I kind of am. But I'm like, I just think I'm like way more scared of them, or just feel way more responsibility, and also feel like I can't disappoint them way more than I'm scared of the Klansmen. So, and I remember one of the first times I visited a Klansman back on this documentary, John Safran versus God, and we kind of drove to the bunker, and I'd worked out all these questions I had to ask him, because with that one, I was kind of asking him a lot of normal questions, and then I asked a couple of faux naive questions to the Klansman where it gets revealed that I'm Jewish, and so I just remember, like, obviously you just feel like you want to chicken out, like one side of you does, and I'm just thinking, my God, no, SBS gave this money, I've got this whole crew here, the flights were so expensive, and it's all led up to this. You know, it was probably like 6 months earlier, I was writing it with a co-writer in some writer's room or whatever. It's like, I just have the responsibility to just go through with this. And also, just to annoy my enemies, if I have any, that me pushing through actually creates this kind of good creative energy. Because unlike, like, you know, just say with Borat or Ali G, like, he's the Sacha Baron Cohen, he's super confident, and that's the joke or something. Whilst with me, often you can tell I am freaking scared. And so this whole thing of, there's this good energy, creative energy, like watching me, like watching going, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable to watch. And in a way, it's more uncomfortable to watch because you can see he's scared and he's really just pushing through or whatever. So yeah, so that thing that could be a negative of I feel scared all the time it becomes a positive. It's good to like lean into just, like the positives and stuff.
But it's so visceral. I think like as a viewer and even as a reader, you're sitting there on edge going, oh my goodness, is he going to be okay? And obviously the fact that the book is out or, the documentary is produced, then we all know that you're okay. But you must have people in your life who worry. Like, I don't know that I would want to be your family member. I'd be worried sick about you all the time.
No, my dad's more, and he's been like this because when I first got involved in the TV biz, it was at the changing of the epoch. Like before that, it's like for instance, you get a job at the ABC when you're 20 and you're employed by the ABC and you might be there till you're 60, right? And then when I was in the 90s, it was like changing over to this thing where like, well, no, you actually get subcontracted out and you don't have a permanent job. So from my dad's point of view, it's always just been more, he's worried. Oh, that's his anxiety. It's like, oh, John, I'd just be far more relaxed if you had like a regular 9 to 5. But it's not like great, like he likes my stuff, and he's always like also to annoy my enemies. Like my dad's proud of my stuff. He always tells me, he goes, oh, man, that's really fun or whatever. And he goes, John, I don't know how you do it. How have you sustained a career like this? I'm just baffled, not baffled in a bad way, but he's going, it's so hard. He's really aware that in the arts, it's kind of hard to sustain a career. In this SBS thing, I haven't seen the edit yet, but about this whole thing of being nervous and pushing through just helps with the work. Hopefully, I don't want to jinx it, but I filmed this thing a couple of days ago, and it's these threats this person has received because of what they've done, and they're spooling through all these death threats, and there's all these like they're really horrific, but there's also lots of like really the worst of the worst words, and I'm sitting there and we're reading them together, but I'm like too scared, not scared, but I've kind of go, oh, it's kind of like I don't want to say the swear words or the slurs or whatever, so I'm reading them, but at the last moment I pull back and go, oh, that's the C word, the F word. Okay, that's it. Yeah, but I really am genuinely thinking maybe I should say these to show how horrific it is, but kind of pull back at the last second. And I think one of the camera dudes said, he goes, oh, that's really, it was really interesting to watch that. Like it was so much stronger that I'm kind of pulling back at the last minute rather than trying to go with the, because, on a veneer sense, it would be like, oh, isn't going to be so much more shocking and powerful if you just say these awful words and then somehow fight tooth and nail to get SBS to broadcast it. But anyway, I don't know. Blah, blah. Please. Oh, shut up. Tell me your next question.
I don't think it's blah. I think it's, I just, let's talk about Kanye. Your book, Squat, which is all about you squatting at one of Kanye West's kind of abandoned mansions. But the book itself is also a journey of you trying to kind of track him down and you interact with like people at, a particular church that he's going to and all that kind of stuff. I mean, surely someone would have in his circle, communicated to him that there's this guy
Nah, no way. Not necessarily because, he's just have so many bigger fish to fry than worrying about some guy who kind of climbed the fence at one of his abandoned mansions and stayed there for a week. Like, I wish he'd come out and said something or whatever, but I think it's, and also he's obviously got his own headspace going on, so I just don't, if he was going to do something, he would have done it by now. So it did get some attention in, like, it went viral on one of those, like, Lad's Bible or something like that, and a few weeks ago, an Australian comedian was talking about it on the Joe Rogan podcast, so I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of cool or whatever, but I don't know. I didn't ring Penguin to see if there was a spike. Also this other thing, I just have to let my work be, and if someone's going to take the ball and run with it, they will. And if not, it's like I can't like if I could, I would. I'd have no problem with artificially doing something, but I've got to let my work just take on their own life in the way that other people are going to want them to take on their own life. Like, for instance, probably one of the I think maybe the biggest feedback I've ever got and continue to decades later is there was a story about how the Australian soccer team when they were playing in the World Cup qualifiers. I don't want to say the years because I'll get them wrong, but I think the 70s maybe. Anyway, they were in Rhodesia, they were in Mozambique, and they were playing against what was then Rhodesia. And this witch doctor, they got a witch doctor to put a curse. The Australian soccer team got the witch doctor to put a curse on the Rhodesian team. And then they won. But then they were like, they didn't pay the witch doctor.
No.
And the witch doctor said, I'm going to put a curse on you.
Surely
for
you'd
not
pay
paying
your witch
me.
doctor. That would be...
And ever since then, they never qualified for the World Cup. And there were people who top people as in Australian soccer genuinely believed it was the curse of not paying the witch doctor. So anyway, on one of my shows, I decided to go back to Mozambique and break the curse. And anyway, so I did break the curse. Like, I went through the process. I went back to the original stadium where the match took place. And I got these witch doctors to behead a chicken and squeeze chicken blood all on me. And stuff like that. And so, in theory, I'd broken the curse or whatever. Anyway, so I just didn't really think about it that much. Johnny Warren, he was the coach of the, he was involved with the Australian soccer team then, which then became known as the Socceroos. Anyway, and very much respected, top guy. He was the one who absolutely believed that there'd been a curse. And so I got to run the story on that, because with a lot of these things, it's like all you need is someone else to sincerely believe it, and then it's kind of true or whatever. Anyway, after I took the curse off, so this is whatever, like 20 years after the curse went on, and they never qualified in any of that time. And after I'd got the curse off, and I'd kind of forgotten about this, but then the next World Cup, Australia qualified for the first time, and I woke up and there were just dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of messages.
Wow.
I was all confused. And it's like, you broke the curse. And then ever since then, there's so many newspaper articles that bring it up. And pretty much there won't be a week that goes by on Twitter where if I Google my name, there's not someone going, oh, we need John to take the curse off whatever, Collingwood or whatever.
Don't do that.
Yeah, and all that kind of jazz like that. And it's its own myth. I love that stuff so much, where I've got like a story that's kind of gone out into the world and become part of this, I don't know, just part of lore, LORE. Yeah, so I find that awesome. And I just, and all these years later, still people contact me about that, and they joke around, but they're sincere about it, that I've broken the curse. And yeah, I love when my stories somehow take on a bit of they become part of Australian like folklore in their own kind of modest way. And it's just like, oh, that's what this is about. That's very flattering.
I think the Joe Rogan clip's kind of interesting though, because obviously he'd never heard of you before. And this Australian, I think he's a comedian, was trying to explain you to Joe Rogan and talked about, everything from you getting crucified to, all the various
in the Philippines.
things.
Yeah.
Is it weird?
Yeah, there'll be people listening now. Who will just be, and what now? When you said got crucified, yeah, it's not my fault, but there's a ritual. People get crucified on Easter Sunday in this island in the Philippines, and so I took part in it. So it's like part of a ritual. So it's not like me just, whatever. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted your question.
But it's like being described. I think I was sitting at a dinner in Chicago, I don't know, a year ago, and I was with an Australian and many, many Americans that I was working with. And you and I had just caught up, and you'd told me about the book, and I said, this guy's crazy. You've got to kind of see his work. And then it's like, well, how would you describe him? And I'm literally trying to describe all of the things that you've done over the course of time, with this one other Australian backing me up so I don't seem like an absolute crazy person. And I've just got these are pretty out there creative people, and they're all just looking at me like, is she on drugs? This person cannot exist. This is just not real. It was like I'd created some urban myth of who John Safran is. So I mean, when someone describes you to Joe Rogan, who, maybe he should be featured in your kind of censorship documentary, but, when someone's describing you like that, is that not wild to you to go, yeah, I have kind of done a crucifixion?
No, I am proud. Like I've still got a couple of decades left in me in my work or whatever. But yeah, like when I was, a young teenager and up until in my early years of uni, I was into this like slightly kind of, well, it's like this kind of countercultural, strange stuff where, yeah, like I said, like Abby Hoffman or just even like mainstream subversive stuff like Mad Magazine or something. And I'd always be like reading something and this was the old days, kids, before the internet, where you had to like exert a bit more, like things were far more mysterious. Yeah, and things that were mysterious, like for instance, you'd walk past the Church of Scientology and you'd heard things about how, oh, they've got this secret law in there, and it's like they believe in UFOs, but you just don't know. There's nothing you can do about it. And like, now you can just Google it and stuff like that. So I'd always be going into strange bookshops and reading about, getting books on the esoterics and the secrets of the Freemasons and stuff. And anyway, I was just kind of like into that kind of fun stuff. And also, I really like creative stuff, whether they were books or films, where they were countercultural, but not like overly heavy-handed, like trying to make a political point, for instance. Like I like lots of the things were political, but it was more a bit adjacent and stuff like that. Like a good example of that would be like hip hop, back in the late 80s, where it's political, but not in this, just in an adjacent way and stuff. Anyway, I always like that. But what I'm getting at is like, yeah, I am pretty proud that I've ended up being, in my own way, like that world. That I've gone on all these gonzo adventures and I'm still just having fun and it's still working. Like right now, I'm in the middle of an SBS shoot that's crazy, and I always like leaning into just doing stuff. I don't think like, for instance, King Gizzard, the band, their director contacted me and said, "Oh, we're thinking, will you be in like in a video clip and you've got to play some guy who's woken up, or he spent a whole night out taking ecstasy and now he's just dancing around the city and whatever." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool. Like I've never acted before, but cool.
Why not?"
Like, like leaning into things. And I'm definitely jinxing this because this could be a train crash. In this SBS doco, we're filming a few little skits and yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I'm kind of up for things, especially, I'm definitely not so much in the real world or whatever, like, but when it comes to work and creativity, I think I'm way more up for things than a lot of people. Like, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how this is going to work out. I might look like an idiot, but I don't know. I kind of trust you, director of the King Gizzard clip, or I guess I should trust you. And yeah, I like doing things where you kind of put on a bit of a show. Like, I don't like to be, I think I already come across as super sarcastic, even when I'm not trying to be. I just come across like this. So I don't feel like I have to, I try to run the other way when it comes to things like that. And by that, I mean, I try to like throw myself into things where I'm vulnerable and I'm going to look like an idiot if it doesn't go right, or I'm probably going to look like an idiot even if it does go right. And I kind of, I like kind of jumping into things where you sort of risk being a fool, because it's kind of like, why not? and when it works. And
it's a different kind of description, isn't it? But okay, you say you've never acted before, so you're saying Music Jamboree was not acting?
Well, you see, first of all, the guy from the King Gizzard clip, he said, "John, I think you're going to be good at this," because I was saying to him, I was going, I'm happy to do that. I really was saying to him, I'm going, I'm happy to do this, and this sounds good, but you got to understand, like, I might ruin your clip. And they were shooting it on film and everything. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, and he's like a proper director. Like, it wasn't some thing. I just said, listen, I'm happy to do this if you think, but you have to know I'm worried I'm just going to ruin your thing. Like, I don't know how to dance. Like, the whole thing is like I'm dancing crazily. And there was what's his name? Is it that Fat Boy? There's that Fat Boy Slim clip where what's his face is dancing? Where that famous guy's dancing around. What's his name? People listening are going to be screaming out his name, going, how can you forget his name?
I know.
But anyway, so I was feeling like that might be a bit of a reference point. I was going, yeah, but that guy knows how to dance. Like, that's what I was thinking. I was going, that Fat Boy Slim clip works because what's his face? Here, I'm
his name is going to bother me now. This is really going to.
Yeah, I know. I'm typing in Fat Boy.
Please Google it. Please put us out of the misery.
Christopher Walken.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm like telling the director, I'm going, listen, if you think I'm going to be doing that Christopher Walken thing, like I'd love to be able to. I'm not trying to be uncooperative, but he obviously knows how to dance and I don't. Anyway, so the director dude said to me, he said, John, when you went to America and got exercised, because I got exorcised by this
Yes.
Christian dude, and he kind of hypnotized me or something. Like he managed to make it work. So he either did exercise me or he hypnotized me. I don't know what. But I'm like, he's hitting me with the Bible. I'm kind of flapping around the floor and stuff. And the director, he's going, John, when I saw you do that, I was like, oh, no, you can do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And then with that as a reference point, I was able to use my muscle memory from being exercised to being to dancing around the Melbourne buildings, acting as if I was had spent all the night on ecstasy. There was no ecstasy taken, by the way.
Oh, that's disappointing.
So that made me really good.
So you really had to act.
I really had to act. So anyway, basically, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm up for things, and I love it. I really love it. I love kind of doing playful things that, if I trust the other person, and even if I kind of only half trust them, I'll be kind of, okay, I'm up for that.
So tell me about the hip hop. Where did this begin? And who was it? Like, who was the hip hop artist that really drew you in?
Someone once said to me recently, they said that I'd either really enhance their life or ruin their life. Oh, yeah, it was like an Australian author, a younger Australian author. He said, oh, John, I used to watch your stuff when I was young and I just wanted to like go out on adventures like you. And so therefore, I decided to be a writer that goes out on adventures. So thanks for ruining my life. It was basically saying how hard it is to be in that thing. So hip-hop ruined my life or benefited my life because I just loved the storytelling aspect of it. Because most songs didn't have... obviously there's some songs that have a beginning, middle and end, but hip-hop back at late 80s and early 90s, I guess, it had like this kind of literal storytelling. I was like, oh my God, this is great. And I might be able to do this myself because I just have to write it down. And I can't sing, but maybe I can talk and stuff like that. And I just loved how you had to decode rap. Like the storytelling was, like you had to be awake and not take things literally and just go, oh, that person's being playful, they're not being serious, or they're telling a story this way. So for instance, the offensive aspect of some of hip-hop, like gangster rap, where it's about doing drive-bys and shooting people, like that's quite challenging when you're young. And then you kind of go, oh, no, but they're not like literally saying go down and shoot people. What they're doing, they're trying to tell a story and paint a picture of a world that I'm not part of and stuff, and that's the way they're doing it. And in storytelling, someone can be a character and it can be a bit ambiguous. Is the person telling this story, are they playing a character or are they playing themselves, or is it a bit of half of both or whatever? So I really liked all that. And I loved how, like for instance, a lot of early rap was a lot of bragging about how rich they were. Mm. And then I kind of managed to decode that of like some of them at least were not from rich backgrounds, and that if you're not from a rich background, you're not necessarily going to like want to over romanticize being poor. Like that's a luxury that middle class people have, if you know what I mean, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna really kind of over egg how much I've struggled. Whilst there's not, and obviously different people have different attitudes. I'm not saying everyone's like this, but obviously for some people, like when if they've grown up and they've been in not the great economic situation, like there's a bit of like, well, I've got a bit of shame, not that they should, but they might be feeling that, and they're going to be expressing themselves and over egging that they're rich and they've made it and everything. So that's an example of how like you have to listen to it and be alive and decode things. And so in that case, it's like these young men, in this case usually black in America, bragging about being rich was actually telling a working class story, if that makes sense. And I kind of loved how that was just so much more interesting storytelling than, say, reading some political tract in university about, I don't know, the communism or something, or like
the communism.
Communism, I much prefer like art that in an adjacent sense kind of tells you stories about things and tells you a story about politics rather than, reading some tract about the communists and the capitalists and stuff like that. I loved hip hop so much, and I was just fascinated with it, and so thank you very much, LL Cool J, and Public Enemy and Beastie Boys. Oh, Beastie Boys were great, and when I discovered they was like, oh my God, they're Jewish like me, like that was amazing, and Beastie Boys really are good in that, showing how like you don't have to be like a wimp, and like for instance, they were never. If you listen to their stuff, they're never trying to pretend they're not who they are. So they're not like, and it just works compared to with like some other white rappers. Like for instance, the Beastie Boys were just like, oh no, we're listening to punk and we're listening to hip hop. So now here's our music, and some of it's a bit punk and some of it's a bit hip hop, and blah, and it was just so honest, if you know what I mean. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, let's not put any of the punk in because we want to
pure hip
pretend
hop or something.
that we grew up and we're not like they're not like pick me whites, if you know what I mean. They're never like, oh no, we're the good whites or whatever. They just happily play guitars if they want to, which is quote unquote, at least if it's in the punk sense, is considered more white. Like they're kind of like great ambassadors and what do you call it? Like people to look at about how you can just explore other things.
Just be authentic.
And you can be authentic whilst respecting other things and being influenced by other things. But I mean, this is like some of the stuff. I'm so old now, which you might not be able to tell because I've got oil of Ulan skin. I'm like Audrey Hepburn, where suddenly I'm old, but my skin's so young. But it is kind of funny looking at the changing world, and I feel like the world's changing again. Like when I say in the last 6 months to a year, it's changing again. But like when I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, it was considered very left-wing and progressive to kind of absorb other cultures and be, like, I don't just listen to, white music. Because I'm progressive, I'll listen to black music too. And therefore, when I'm producing this music, there's going to be multiple influences on it. That was considered like progressive. And obviously, like I think we're over this now, but like, late 2010s, then it becomes like everything's a problem. What? Oh my God, why are you using that African, bell in your thing? That's cultural. And suddenly became really a problem, kind of dragging up all these other little influences. But I think we're kind of moving past that. So, but it's just interesting. One of the real interesting things, if you're young and listening to this, one of the real interesting things is just the plot twists in the backdrop to the world where and we're never at the end of history. Like you always think you have like this present day bias where you think, oh, now everything's going to be like this forever. And it's just not. There's just these huge plot twists in the backdrop to the world that just change everything.
It is amazing how much I think, like, even in our lifetimes, when you think about, the internet and then social media and just, the mass mediation through devices and, all that stuff that's going on. AI, I guess, is one of those big discussion points that everyone's talking about at the moment. And I'm particularly interested in AI and creativity. Do you think that AI is a threat to creativity, or do you think it's going to be a friend of creativity?
I think it depends. Like, I think you just have to have like media literacy, and particularly when it comes to like trying to find out information from AI, it's trust but verify. And in fact, I just used it like an hour ago when I was writing this SBS script. Like, what's another word for address? As in, he addressed the topic and then comes up with really fast. I used to look up a paper thesaurus for things like that. And so it's good for that. But I really, I don't think you can trust that the people who are going to make heaps of money of it in the best interest of artists. I think artists will be, you've just got to be really careful, and you've got to have a bit of selfishness. When I say selfishness, I mean a bit of like self-interest as an artist, not be suckered in by, like having people who are pro AI who are going to make heaps of bank on it, having some spin on it that it's all good and that, it's like, no, have some self-interest. Although, and I think interestingly, my self-interest is about tripling down on having my own voice, idiosyncratic voice. And by my voice, I don't mean my lisp. I mean my point of view on things. Like with this SBS doco, Like, and not that I'm thinking that hard about it, but there is a bit of like I'm in this new AI and everything's replaceable. And it's almost like the only hope I have is by doing a project where it's really idiosyncratic and has my point of view and it's coming from a weird angle and it's funny. And like, that's my only hope of surviving and getting other projects up because, yeah, so it might be handy for any artists listening to sort of double, triple down on trying to be idiosyncratic in your own way, whatever that is, and working out your voice and having it because maybe that's how we'll be able to survive. Maybe what I'm saying is let's die fighting. You know, like maybe we are all going to die, my fellow artists, but we might as well die fighting. You know, I might as well try and get one more documentary after this and one more book or something before we're all like replaced by AI and stuff. But again, and also there's just such, as I say, there's such plot twists. It's even like in book publishing, it was meant to be like ebooks just are going to replace everything. There's not going to be any more paper books or whatever. And then it just didn't work out that way. People still love paper books enough to sustain an industry and to sustain bookshops, at least, you know, in places like Melbourne, I guess. You just never know what the plot twist is going to be. And also, I think you should try to do what you want because I'm not clever enough to work out how to be successful by doing something I don't want. And so let me explain that another way. It's like if I do something I like and it's it ends up being a car crash, at least I did something I liked. But then if you do like some overthinking, thinking you're being clever, pandering idea, if that works and you somehow make $1 million, like go for it, right? I'm totally go for it. But if it doesn't work, then you got nothing and you also don't have, you don't have a good thing. And also you find out you kind of win in different ways. Like in Australia, maybe not for younger people, but slightly older people, like there's all these stories, as you'd know, like talking in America with your friend, they go, oh yeah, and John got exorcised and in America got no, took it. Want to make a bet? I don't know it. Want to make a bet that the evening I got exorcised on television on SBS in whatever it was, 2005 or something like that. Want to make a bet that was the lowest rating show on television that night. Like there would have been some reality show or whatever, or some on 7, something else on 9, something on
the Osbournes
whatever.
would have been on MTV.
Oh, well, that's a cool one though. But what I'm saying is like who cares? Like somehow like I can still get work, even on a practical sense. Like I can get work now because I did those things, and like it just doesn't matter that it was the lowest rating thing on television. Like in this other way, it's like that's what, the memories of that and the storytelling of that is why I can get books up at Penguin or can still get a doco up at SBS. So so just try to do what you like. Is that inspiring?
I mean, think about your career, for instance. Had those things just gone out in 2005 on SBS, and it was 1985, you would have had to have been sitting there to have watched it. And had you not, it would have been maybe a few of your friends telling you about it. But today, the very fact that, my daughter can go back and see Race Around the World and just has to go on YouTube and, it's technology has allowed kind of content in particular to live on in a multitude of ways.
That's super fun. I love that when but I don't even know how to weaponize that to my advantage. Like, for instance, someone will send me like a link to like some meme site, and it's got like one of my stories cut down, and it's got like whatever, like 500,000 likes or something like that, and 10 million views or whatever. But whenever I try to be clever and to like upload my own thing, or like I'm obviously I don't even know how that happens or whatever, because like, I'll get like, oh, well, that's great, I got 900 likes, and like, so I don't care. It's just like, I can only do one thing at once, and so I can't do this documentary for SBS and then also try to figure out how to hack the algorithm so when I upload my own work, it kind of, I'll somehow just hope that magic happens some other way.
I think when it does happen, it happens from the people organically. I think that's the thing that you can't, you can't kind of create, even if you want to, right? It's just those kind of organic moments that you never really know when something's going to go off. But what is interesting is that your back catalogue now exists in real time for anyone who wants to go on that adventure and kind of check it out. Speaking of, when it comes to your back catalogue, is there anything that you look back on now and go, oh, maybe I pushed that a little too far, or I probably wouldn't do that again today? Is there anything
Yeah, totally. But having said that, that's all coming up on my new SBS show. So, yeah, like I talk about, yes, I'm definitely, putting myself up to be shot down or whatever. I don't know, but I don't know what you can do. So no, I more have regrets about. I've occasionally done something mid or lower, and I kind of think, like I screwed that up. Like I just did not think that through, or that was wrong. So I'm way more think about things like that. And I don't beat myself up, but I'm just like, how do I avoid that again? And also the things I feel guilty about are usually not really topics or he was offensive about this or that. It's not really that. It's that. And I try not to do this anymore. Like at the height of that kind of pranking culture, like you just like, I'd feel just bad because it's like I'd said something like, well, we're doing this or whatever, and then you kind of don't do that. You do something else, and it was all for a prank, and you just feel like you've double-crossed someone, and you feel... So it's more like this human guilt rather than like, oh, I shouldn't have said that offensive thing or whatever. So I do feel bad about that. And so weirdly, I'm becoming more and more ethical about things like that when the world's becoming less and less like now everyone's like secretly filming each other and secretly taping, sort of like everyone, and like just as everyone's getting into that, like with my last book, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna hit record until I get their permission, and just as some sort of like, oh, why not try something a different way? And there you go.
You've always showed up very pleasant, I think. Like, I think you come with good intentions, and that's probably why people do, gravitate. I remember when I first met you, actually, in Cairns, Chris Taylor was emceeing as well, and he said that The Chaser was inspired by you. And I've got to say, I was a little surprised by that because...
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, well, I just thought The Chaser just felt so much more targeting of not in a bad way, but like a very intentional pranking and targeting, whereas I always thought that your work was probably led more by curiosity than the stunt, if that makes sense. But
and it's also I think it's, I don't know why, but I'm like, because I'm more interested in, I'm more curious about other topics, like things around religion and mysticism, and by extension of that kind of gets into like ethnicity or whatever, as opposed to, for whatever reason, I'm just not that, like, I don't feel I can make funny parochial politics generally. So maybe if I thought I could, I'd do it or whatever. So I've generally avoided that. But obviously that's great for other people. You know what I mean? That's great for The Chaser or whatever. But so I guess that's where I feel my work just feels a little different to The Chaser, is that they'll be like, oh, this has happened in politics and let's do some thing targeting that politician, which is cool or whatever. but also sometimes I just feel it's like the foibles of humans is, I find more interesting, including myself, in my stuff, even if there is a veneer that it's about something political or whatever, like, if that makes any sense.
It does. I think you really love people, John. It comes across that you actually care about people. And
oh, that's nice of you to say, but let's not over-egg it too much, because then...
I don't want to ruin your brand.
No, someone listening will be going, well, hang on, I was willing to give John a free pass up until it was over-egged that much that I have to bring up this, you know what I mean? But like, for instance, I once pranked Ray Martin, who at the time...
Yes.
Was a really powerful, probably equal first place, if not first place, the most powerful person on air in Australian TV. And his TV show got in trouble for doing door-stopping people, and it was seen as really, in some occasions, bullying and unethical. So then I turned up to his house and kind of doorstopped him as a kind of parody or whatever. And he got really angry, and he did all the things that people do when they were confronted by a current affair. Like suddenly he grabs me by the collar, a bit like victims on a current affair grab the reporter by the collar. He put his hand over to try to block the camera, just like. And also, I just accused him of like a ridiculous thing. I said I was accusing him of being slack, and why has he slept in? Because his show would accuse unemployed people of being slack and sleeping in or whatever. Anyway, so I said, what do you do still at home? It's 11 o'clock in the morning, Ray. Decent Australians, hardworking Australians are all out at work, or you're still loafing about at home. Anyway, so he starts defending himself, of course, and by going like, listen, John, I worked till midnight last night. You can ring them up on, and like, I'm like, this just shows how you can make someone sound guilty of something. Like clearly he works hard. But I've somehow made the host of a current affair do all the things that a victim of a current affairs does, and I falsely accuse him of something, and he seems guilty, and he feels the need to kind of fight against this. And so my thing was more about that, like, wow, how much must the other people who look guilty maybe not guilty, or it's more complicated if you can make the host of a current affairs look guilty. But I wasn't like, I thought he did the right thing by throttling me, if you know what I mean. Like straight after that, the ABC lawyers looked at him. One of the first things they go, John, we have to say this. Do you want to press charges because he like throttled you or whatever? And I'm like, it didn't cross my mind, and I was just kind of going, well, kind of was annoying him. You know what I mean? Like it'd be a bit.
It was a little bit deserved.
Yeah, it was a little bit deserved. But that was kind of like a thing where like some people took it to be like this real, like take down Ray, and Ray's a bad person that he did this to. And it's like, I don't feel like he's a bad person. I just kind of feel like maybe he just did the normal thing that a human would do. And maybe other people who look guilty on a current affair have just done the normal thing that not guilty people do.
I know, but you did that at a time when people probably didn't have a lot of empathy for the people on a current affair. So there is something in you that does care fundamentally for people.
Yes. Yes, I love it. I'll take it. Thank you.
John, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the listeners and the viewers. Thank you.